I'm Margaret, 69 years old, a widow living out in the quiet edges of Texas. This house used to ring with laughter, but now, every wall, every window echoes nothing but emptiness. I thought love after all my years of sacrifice would be the one thing that stayed solid, but I was wrong. For years, I pulled from my pension, from the tiny bit of savings left after my husband died, to help my son Daniel and his wife Sophia. They were young, just starting out, always short on money. And me? I was a mother who couldn't turn her back. I paid their rent. I covered the utilities. I bought them new furniture so they'd have a decent home. When I added up, it's at least $45,000, nearly everything I'd saved in a lifetime. I believed I was building happiness for my son, for his little family. I thought one day I'd be able to look at it all and feel proud. But then came the day that changed everything. It was an ordinary afternoon. I sat in my armchair scrolling through Facebook, and suddenly there it was. Photo after photo of Daniel and Sophia, him in a sharp suit, her in a white gown smiling like the Sunday. Flowers, guests, hugs, toasts, a wedding. A wedding I hadn't been invited to. My heart began to pound. My hands trembled as I scrolled. Under one picture, Sophia had written, "Only special people were invited." Special people. I felt the blood in my veins turn to ice. I was the mother who had given almost everything I had to prop them up. Yet somehow, I wasn't special enough to stand there on the most important day of my son's life. Those words cut like a blade, clean, cold, merciless. I sat there for hours, staring at the wall. My ears were ringing. At first, I couldn't even cry. The tears felt stuck somewhere in my throat. Only later did they come, hot and bitter. And I asked myself, where did I go wrong? I had given everything, loved without conditions, and in return, I was erased. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the house in silence, running my fingers over memories, the chair where Daniel used to study, the blanket I'd bought for Sophia that first winter. Every object seemed to mock me, and in my head her words kept echoing. Only special people were invited. I felt cast out. Forgotten. Not by strangers, but by the one person I had built my life around. Something inside me cracked that day. The naive belief that a mother's love and sacrifice would always be honored died on my son's wedding day. But in the ashes of that belief, another spark flickered, a new thought: wake up. I couldn't keep buying love with money. My blind sacrifices had turned me into a thing to be used. So I sat at my kitchen table under the dim yellow light, staring at the stack of bills and bank statements. Page by page, I went through them. Numbers don't lie. They don't comfort. They don't pretend. I began adding it up. $1,200 for their first month's rent. $300 for new tires on Daniel's car. $5,000 to remodel the kitchen because Sophia said a wife deserved a proper place to cook. Groceries, utilities, internet, even a new living room set so guests wouldn't feel embarrassed. And then the total, over $45,000. That number stared back at me like it was laughing. Here's the price of the love you tried to buy. What had I gotten in return? A seat at my son's wedding? No. A heartfelt thank you? No. Only silence, coldness, and the humiliation of being left outside. Had I turned myself into a bank machine with feelings spitting out money but never embraced in love? I remembered my husband's words before he died. Margaret, live for yourself. Don't sacrifice blindly. You can't buy love with money. I'd forgotten. I thought sacrifice would keep Daniel's heart close. But now I know real love doesn't come from numbers on a bank statement. Blind sacrifice only makes people respect you less, not more. And so I ask you, yes, you, reading this. Have you ever drained your savings for your children, only to be met with ingratitude? Have you ever believed your love was enough, only to have your child turn cold? Have you ever sat alone wondering, do they love me, or do they just love my money? If you have, tell me, share your story. I believe we're not alone. Maybe my story is your story too, just with different names. That day when I folded up the stack of bills and slid them into a drawer, it felt like folding up my whole life. I had traded my freedom and dignity for a false sense of love. But reality had burned that illusion to ashes. I felt like a woman standing at a crossroads. One road meant staying in the dream, still handing out money, still pretending Daniel might change. The other, harder, lonelier, meant letting go. Taking back control of my life. learning to live for myself for the first time in decades. If it were you, which path would you take? Keep sacrificing for cold stares or be brave enough to stop and reclaim yourself? I sat there for a long time, staring at my husband's picture, and I whispered, "You were right. I can't go on like this." In that moment, something shifted inside me. The pain was still there, the betrayal still sharp, but in the ashes I felt a flame rising. I made myself a promise. No more. I will not be a victim of greed and ingratitude. I will wake up. I will take back the power to live my own life. It's just the first step. The first step to finding Margaret, again, not the mother who was used, not the ATM that cries, but a woman worthy of respect, worthy of love, and most of all, worthy of living for herself. After that night, I knew I had to act. The pain inside me wasn't something that could vanish overnight, but I couldn't just sit still and let Daniel and Sophia drain away what little I had left. The next morning, I put on my coat, grabbed my purse, and drove my old car to the Wells Fargo branch near my house. I remember clearly when I told the banker I wanted to cancel every automatic transfer into Daniel's account. My hands were trembling, yet deep inside I felt something strange, fear mixed with relief. It was as if I had just opened an emergency exit for myself. I changed my bank password. I blocked Daniel and Sophia's numbers. I even called the utility company and had all the accounts switched over to their names. If they wanted to live like an independent family, then let them pay the bills like one. A few days later, my landline wouldn't stop ringing. When I finally picked up, Daniel's voice exploded through the receiver, furious, almost screaming. "Mom, why would you do this? I don't have the money to pay. Sophia's been crying all night. How could you?" My heart tightened, but I stayed calm. I answered with just one sentence. "You're grown now, Daniel. You can take care of yourself." The very next day, Sophia called. Her voice dripped with tears, but underneath was steel. "If you still care about Daniel, you'll reconsider. What kind of mother abandons her child in hard times?" I almost laughed. Abandon? After more than $45,000, after years of carrying their weight, I was the one who had been abandoned. Tell me, what would you do if you heard those words? Would you give in, or would you hold firm the way I did? When they saw I wouldn't bend, Daniel and Sophia escalated. They hired a young lawyer and sent papers to my house, demanding I sign over financial power of attorney. Page after page, I read it, my chest tightening. If I signed, I'd lose control of everything. I'd become nothing more than their puppet. I tore the papers to shreds right in front of the messenger. And then came the unthinkable. Daniel and Sophia began spreading rumors that I was suffering from dementia. They went to neighbors, whispering that I wasn't in my right mind. They went to the pharmacy, asking the pharmacist to sign off on paperwork that could serve as fake evidence. They even tried to convince a doctor they knew to declare that I was no longer capable of taking care of myself. Can you believe it? The son I once cradled, the boy I used to sing to sleep, now painting me as a senile old woman just to steal the little I had left. So I ask you, if your own child spun such lies, how would you react? Would you forgive, telling yourself, well, they're still my child? Or would you stand up and fight for your dignity, even knowing the battle would wound you deeply? I know many elders think, better to keep the peace, even if it costs me. But I'm not one of them. I will not let them strip away my dignity after they've already robbed me of love. That day I looked in the mirror. A woman with silver hair stared back, but her eyes burned bright. And I told myself, Margaret, it's time to fight back. If you don't, the rest of your life will belong to someone else's greed. After Daniel and Sophia spread the lie that I had lost my memory, I knew this wasn't just family bickering anymore. It had turned into a real battle, and I needed allies. Alone, I could never stand against the machine of deceit and manipulation they were building. So I went to the Golden Age Legal Center, a support center for the elderly in Houston. I remember the rain that day, the streets glistening under the glow of car lights. My steps were heavy, weighed down not only by age but by shame. It's not easy to admit that your own children are trying to destroy you. I kept asking myself, would they believe me? Or would they think I really was losing my mind? But when I stepped into that small office, something shifted. Posters lined the walls. Protect the rights of the elderly. You are not alone. Say no to family abuse. In that moment, I felt a flicker of strength return. Angela, the attorney, a young woman with bright eyes, sat across from me. I told her everything, being shut out of the wedding, the $45,000 I had given away, and how Daniel and Sophia had fabricated my memory loss. Angela listened quietly. No interruptions. No judgment. When I stopped, she said, "Mrs. Margaret, what you're experiencing is elder abuse. This is not your fault, and you are not alone. You have every right to stand up for yourself." Hearing those words, I nearly burst into tears. After weeks of insults and humiliation, someone had finally confirmed it. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't useless. I was a victim, and I deserved protection. What do you think? When we're older and our own children harm us, should we turn to the law? Or should we grit our teeth and stay silent because family shouldn't take family to court? Tell me what you think, because this question still weighs on my heart. It wasn't just Angela who gave me hope. One evening, I went to a gathering at St. Mary's Church, a place I often visited for holidays. After the prayer, Pastor John held a sharing circle for seniors. I hesitated, then stood up, my voice trembling, and told them how my son and daughter-in-law had deceived me, trying to take my property. For a few seconds, the room was silent. Then Linda, an elderly woman with silver hair sitting in the back row, came up and hugged me. She whispered, "My daughter tricked me into signing papers to sell my house. I know exactly how you feel." At that moment, I realized I was not alone. There were so many others carrying the same wound, betrayed by the very children they had raised. So what do you think? When blood becomes the enemy, should we forgive to keep the peace, or cut ties to preserve our dignity? I believe everyone will have a different answer. In the weeks that followed, I returned to the church often, joining the group conversations. We didn't just pray, we offered each other empathy. Linda spoke about her pain. Frank shared how his son emptied his retirement account. Helen wept as she remembered being left in a nursing home. Each story was a scar, but also proof. We were not alone. And strangely, the more I listened, the stronger I became. Before, I felt small and helpless. Now, I felt like part of something larger, a community of elders refusing to be silenced. Do you agree that when we unite, we're stronger than any force trying to manipulate us? Or do you believe, in the end, everyone must fend for themselves? I'd like to hear your answer. Every time I left the church, my steps felt lighter. I was no longer the trembling Margaret cowering under Daniel and Sophia's threats. I was becoming someone new, calm, resolute, ready for whatever lay ahead. I knew the real storm would come in the courtroom, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the law beside me, a community behind me, and most importantly, I had found strength within my own heart. The day of the trial finally arrived. I drove my old car, my heart pounding, sweat beading on my skin despite the chill of March. The road to Houston's family court felt endless. With every turn of the wheels, I asked myself, would this be the day I lost everything, or the day I reclaimed myself? Inside the courthouse, I saw Daniel and Sophia standing there, dressed neatly, faces blank, as if no blood tie had ever existed. When my eyes met theirs, Sophia turned away. Daniel looked at me with a stare I'd only seen in strangers, calculating and cold. The hearing began. Their lawyer rose, voice booming. "Your Honor, Mrs. Margaret can no longer care for herself. She's confused, has made repeated mistakes, and is a danger to herself. Her son and daughter-in-law only want to protect her. We ask the court to grant them financial guardianship." I clenched my fists. Hearing those lies, my heart burned with fury and grief. I had sacrificed my life for them, and now they were parading me as a senile old woman in front of everyone. One by one, their witnesses took the stand. A hostile neighbor claimed I often forgot to lock my door and wandered the streets. A pharmacist produced a paper saying I had forgotten to buy my medication and couldn't recall its name. Even a doctor I had never met testified that I showed signs of severe memory loss. Each word was a knife. I turned to Angela, my eyes blurred. Will they believe me? She put her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Trust me, the truth will prevail." Then it was my turn. I stood, my legs trembling, but my voice rang clear. "I am Margaret. I am 69 years old, and I am fully competent. I do not need anyone controlling my life. Your Honor, my son and daughter-in-law have financially exploited me for years. I gave them more than $45,000 from my pension and savings. When I stopped, they accused me of dementia to seize what remained. I am not insane. I am a mother who trusted too much. The room went silent. I pulled evidence from my folder, an independent doctor's report proving my mental clarity, bank statements showing Daniel had withdrawn money from my account repeatedly, receipts and messages proving Sophia had used my card for personal shopping. Angela rose, her words steady. Your Honor, this is not protection. This is elder financial abuse. This is a coordinated scheme to take Mrs. Margaret's assets. Their witnesses are baseless. A biased neighbor, a pharmacist signing papers without context, and a doctor who never examined her. A murmur swept through the courtroom. I saw some people nod, others frown with outrage. In that moment, I felt the truth beginning to surface. The judge struck the gavel, voice firm. The court denies the petition for guardianship. There is no evidence Mrs. Margaret lacks capacity. On the contrary, there is ample proof she is competent and has been exploited. Mrs. Margaret retains full control of her finances and legal rights. At that moment, it felt as if a mountain had lifted from my chest. I raised my head and looked straight at Daniel and Sophia. They lowered their eyes, unable to meet mine. A tide of emotions rose in me, sorrow, anger, and release. I had won not just the case, but my own fear. What about you? Would you have the courage to take your own child to court as I did? Some might call me cruel, but I believe what's crueler is allowing your children to trample you to the end of your days. Would you stay silent or stand up? Tell me, because I know this isn't an easy question. When I walked out of the courthouse, the afternoon sun touched my face. For the first time in months, I felt I could truly breathe. I knew the fight wasn't completely over, but I had reclaimed the most important thing, the right to my own life. The trial was over, but the echoes of those stormy days still lingered in my heart. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt like someone reborn. The afternoon sun warmed my face, but what truly filled me with light was the truth. I had not allowed my children to make me a victim for the rest of my life. A few weeks later, I decided to sell the old house. That house held countless memories, but also too much pain. Every wall, every corner reminded me of the years I lived in an illusion, believing money could buy love. I needed a new beginning. I moved into a small apartment near the local Baptist church. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it was neat, warm, and mine. I arranged each thing with my own hands, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to leave space for Daniel or Sophia. This was my place, my life. On my first day there, I stood by the window, took a deep breath, and whispered, "From now on, Margaret, you will live for yourself." I began joining community activities. With new friends, I took a short trip to Galveston, sitting by the sea, listening to the waves. I enrolled in a pottery class at the public library, my trembling hands shaping clumsy little forms that still carried freedom. I volunteered at the soup kitchen, finding joy in the grateful eyes of those who received a hot bowl of soup. Each experience was a dose of healing. I was no longer the Margaret who kept withdrawing money, hoping her children would trade it for affection. I had become someone new, someone who knew how to love herself, who could savor the smallest of moments. But I won't lie to you, not everything is perfect. Some nights I still lie awake wondering, does Daniel ever regret it? Does Sophia? Will they one day knock on my door, asking for forgiveness, hugging me as they did when they were children? And then I ask myself, if that day comes, will I open the door or lock it? Will I forgive, or will I keep my distance to protect myself? What about you? If your children returned one day, apologizing after everything they had done, what would you do? Forgive them to preserve what's left of blood ties or turn away to protect your heart from breaking again? Share your answer in the comments, because I believe everyone carries a different truth. One Sunday morning, I went to church for service. As the choir began to sing, my heart grew still. Sitting quietly in the back row, I closed my eyes and whispered, "True love cannot be bought with money, and a mother's freedom can never be too costly." I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Daniel and Sophia will vanish from my life forever, or one day return to knock on this little apartment door. I don't know whether my heart will choose forgiveness or protection. But I do know this: I have found myself again. I am no longer bound by fear, by numbers in a bank account, or by lies. I am Margaret, and I still have many days ahead to live for me. The future is unwritten, and perhaps that is the greatest freedom I have reclaimed. If you felt this story, press like. If not, leave the number 6 in the comments so I'll know your honest thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that touch the heart.